I don't know if you've heard the song Black Friday by Lil Kim. It's like a fucking Nicki Minaj diss song because, I enjoy that genre quite a bit. But it's just funny because, I'm seeing all these people, like the tweet of, heading into the studio, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it just made me think of that song because there's one part where she's like, Kim more anticipated than a LeBron ring. It's like, this episode is more anticipated than a LeBron ring. It is.
People are hanging on this shit. Indie fans are listening, too.
Yeah, man. That's how you know we're fucking massive.
Yeah, we are.
The whole fucking
gigantic.
league is bruh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how are you holding up?
It's been arguably the darkest day in Locomotive's short history. I think I'm comfortable saying that. But
yeah,
I've got my Bailey's on the rocks right here for the second night in a row. Wow. You got anything on deck?
Yeah, I've got that beer from yesterday, the Mañana in Mallorca, little
you mean
pale ale from Chicago.
When we tried to record and got body slammed by this news. Yeah.
We were, a false start, if ever there was one. Yeah. If this is your first time listening to Seriously Loco, you're getting an extremely weird episode, because this is unique in the circumstances. Obviously, it feels weird even doing admin, but if you're interested, you can find our podcast on all the major podcast platforms, and you can find us at Seriously Loco on social media. You probably found us via Twitter today if you are finding us for the first time. And we obviously, Mikka, had to come together and chat because of the groundbreaking news of Zach Prince being hired as the New Mexico United manager.
You fucking tried it. No, you know what? I think the admin was worth doing because I think there are going to be people listening for the first time to this who are not Locomotive fans per se. So yeah,
welcome supporters of Indy 11 to the Western Conference. We're real, and we're spectacular. Well, I mean, Mikka, we may as well just dive straight into it. There's no use beating around the bush. It was announced officially today that Mark Lowry has left Locomotive through mutual consent after 3 years at the helm as the head coach and technical director of the club. He leaves in his wake 3 playoff appearances and 2 Western Conference finals, and 2, I guess, division championships as well in these weird COVID seasons. So I guess first and foremost, just the initial reaction and I guess, I guess should we talk about how we learned of this, or I don't even know where to start, to be quite honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, initial reaction, I guess, is the best place to start. I mean, our reaction, we've had longer to react to it because of how we found out. Officially it was announced today, the 15th, that we're recording this. The club announced it on their social media platforms, that he would be stepping down after 3 years and moving on. But we found out before that.
Yeah.
And then, trust me, it doesn't make it any easier having a leg up on that information. But yeah, I'm still in shock. I'm still trying to process it. I think it doesn't matter how many hints were dropped in the post-match press conference after that shocking exit to Oakland Roots, and kind of talking amongst ourselves about how this could really be a reality. The fact that it has come to pass is still really shocking, and Mark certainly leaves behind a legacy. I mean, he's really built something, special here in such a short amount of time. We rave about it all the time. I said, prior, on the eve of the playoffs, these are the good times, right? These are the good days, and we have to enjoy them while they're here. And I don't think anyone thought we'd be entering this new era of Locomotive so quickly, if you will. But yeah, it's really shocking. It's disappointing. It's at the end of the day, you and I and the rest of the Seriously Local crew, we are fans. And as a fan, like, it really hurts. Yeah. He's had such a huge impact, and he is Locomotive in a lot of ways. Yeah. That being said, no one's bigger than the club, of course, but I mean, he's a huge part of it and a part of its founding. Obviously, I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say we wish him the best, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in Indy 11. It's essentially a different league, the USL Championship Eastern Conference, and we'll get into kind of the hows and the whys and all that. But I mean, your reactions, and then I guess we can dive into how we found out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of this is, like, we are all collectively coming to terms, like, as a fan base. This is a breakup. Like, and that's not to paint it in a negative light, and not to, like, say that it's on bad terms or anything like that. But it's the end of a 3-year relationship. Like, and so I think, like, as a fan base and as just individuals, we all have to take the time to, like, process it and grieve, like, in a weird way. I know that sounds like overly serious for sports, but for people who have followed the team closely and anybody who's interacted with Mark, which is not a small amount of people, given the availability that he made himself very available to us, like, as a upstart podcast. He made himself available to the fans. He, at events and stuff, like, he was always willing to just chat with people. And, he knew supporters, like, by name. Like, he knew a handful of eighth notchers, like, by name. And so the idea that, it's not going to be easy. Like, I think it's okay. For Locomotive fans listening, I think it's okay to, be sad or be upset, and just work through it, like, on your own terms. Like, that's fine. And I think to go along with that, like, as we reacted throughout the day and as things unfolded after the announcement, I think people expect, obviously, we're a podcast and we cover the team and all of these things. Like, there's an expectation that we're going to kind of have a grip on our reaction, and we're going to have, like, very coherent and measured things to say about this. And I think, like, I just want to emphasize for everybody that, like, we are fans at the end of the day, and we are emotionally connected to this club. And so I think, like, some of the stuff throughout the day, like, if you interacted with Seriously Loco and you were like, whoa, they were kind of shitty to me or whatever, like, the reality is, like, we were dealing with this in the same way you guys were.
If you texted me today and I didn't respond, it was for the best, because I probably would not have responded in a way that was nice for anyone. And not to make excuses for ourselves, but we are human beings and fans, and it was raw.
Like, it was raw today. Like, that way, you were getting, like, real time reactions, despite the fact that we did have a heads up. And, I mean, Mikka, we were halfway through a Christian's Question intro to a Oakland Roots, like, match recap podcast. And
looking back, Christian's Question was very ominous.
Yeah, it was
That's
ominous.
the right word.
And, like, poignant and, like, on the nose. And I will leave that intro in, and I might just play it, like, in a break of this episode. I might just play, like, what we got recorded, because it feels fitting.
For sure.
So you guys will be able to hear that. But yeah, we were halfway through, I guess we got to the end of Christian's question and we got interrupted.
Yes, by the man himself, Mark Lowry.
Yeah, Mark asked if he could give me a call. And I rudely made Mikka and Christian wait while I took the call. But I think looking back, I knew exactly why he was calling. I don't think any of us had any delusions about that. He explained his reasoning, and he explained a lot of what he's talked about today. He said on the phone, and ultimately, when I did ask about the destination because I thought that it's important context, because I think ultimately the destination does inform a lot of the why. And so I was definitely a little taken aback when it was another USL team. And I think that has largely been a lot of the reaction today has come from that. Rather than him leaving necessarily, I think everybody kind of made the assumption that it would be, if he left El Paso, he would leave for MLS. And so I think a lot of the reaction today has been more from the destination than the actual decision to leave. But yeah, I do want to thank Mark, for thinking of us, and sure, feeling like we deserved the courtesy of the heads up, because it confirmed the things that we already thought about Mark, which is that, one, he's a genuinely good guy, who is trying his best and is just doing he's doing what he can to fulfill his dreams and his ambitions and the things that he wants out of this sport. But at the end of the day, it would have been very easy for him to not make that phone call.
Absolutely.
And so the fact that he did make that call and just faced the decision kind of head on, I really appreciate. But it did, if you were wondering, why did they stop recording? That was it, because we were all ready to do our kind of Oakland Roots recap and mailbag episode, and we ended up chatting about Mark off the record for about an hour.
Well, can we tell the listeners about why
Sure.
Indy 11? Because I think there's been a lot of rumors and speculation, which is totally normal.
Yeah.
And I don't blame anyone for speculating this, that, and the third about it. But I mean, he was pretty unequivocal in why and what circumstances, pertaining to MLS have led to this decision.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, what he shared on the phone last night. For anyone who has watched the portion of Colin Deaver's interview on KTSM with Mark, what he shared in that interview is what he told me on the phone last night. That was very much in line. He didn't, he wasn't blowing smoke or anything like that. It was this decision has been driven by the fact that he obviously feels, and I think all of us in El Paso and most of the Western Conference, at least, if not all of USL, feel that Mark has done plenty to show that he's got the chops to make it at a higher level. I think we were all hopeful that, that would hold off for as long as possible. But Mark he is an ambitious guy. He wants to reach the highest levels. He wants to prove himself. And I think certainly no one would necessarily hold that against him. But what was interesting and something that's come out of some of his comments in the interview and what he told me on the phone last night was the aspect of this where, despite what he's done over the last 3 years, his profile in the eyes of MLS teams has not broken that threshold of getting even an interview or a callback or like having a shot at a job, which I think most of us would have assumed like he was well clear of that. And I think he has also like internalized that he deserves the shot. So I think part of why Indy 11, and this will be a little bit tougher for El Paso Locomotive fans, like generally to internalize. And I have to like, this is one of there are very few like aspects of US soccer that emphasize any sort of history or any sort of like legacy, but Indy 11 and their history of starting in the NASL, like the restart of the NASL, along with Tampa Bay Rowdies, and well, I guess Miami was there for a short time. They have a history predating like this edition of USL, and as such, like have a bigger profile in like the broad sense of American soccer than El Paso Locomotive do. Like, and that's just kind of the harsh reality, I guess, of what a newer club, like despite the success that Locomotive's had, Indy 11 has this like sustained success and like a portfolio. And I think Mark sees the opportunity, and sort of what he was, you know, saying was that he has this opportunity to show what he can do at another team that also has like proximity to several MLS, like physical proximity to several MLS teams, which I think in his mind, and I mean, probably rightfully so, puts him into the consciousness of those teams like more readily than being out in El Paso. And that's just kind of the harsh reality of his ambitions to get to MLS.
Yeah. And I think that the word that we've been seeing, you know, thrown around today is lateral. You know, people asking why is he doing this? This is a lateral move. And I think that is important to understand, is that Indy are, quote, big and historic, and the proximity to MLS is important to Mark. And I think he was pretty unequivocal in that in the conversation last night.
Yeah.
And, you know, as an El Paso Locomotive fan, that's even hard for me to take, but I do see the point there. And I want to also kind of clarify and kind of maybe jumping to Colin Deaver's defense here, but I think a lot of people took his little snippet from the Mark interview to mean that Mark understands that Indy 11 itself will be going up to MLS, and I don't think that was the message that was trying to be conveyed. I don't think there's a chance of that realistically soon anyway. So, yeah, I just wanted to put that out there, that I don't think that's it, is that Indy 11 is getting, quote, promoted. That's not it at all. It's the proximity to the other clubs. Being in the Eastern Conference, you're near all the, really big teams and things like that. So, not that there aren't big teams in the Western Conference, of course, but I just felt like that was important to say, because I don't think anyone's deluded about the fact that Indy 11 are probably, going to be in USL Championship for a while longer yet. But, right. Yeah, I mean, I certainly sympathize with fans who say this is a lateral move, because on paper, that's what it looks like. If your context is USL Championship and you see that Indy have underperformed, to be fair, in recent seasons, then I certainly can see that. But I think there is a historical context to this that I don't blame anyone for not knowing about, but it's there. So I think you made that point well, Phil.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know that it necessarily makes it like easier in many senses for El Paso Locomotive fans to internalize. But yeah, the reality is that Indy, they have ambitions themselves. And I think he's also spotted a club that is ripe for the taking, in terms of like, Indy's ceiling is far from where they're at right now. They've finished 6th in their division, missed the playoffs as a result. And that is like shocking for a team that's been like competitive in the Eastern Conference now for, since they've joined the league essentially.
And attracts good players. I mean, hello, Dylan Mares,
Yeah.
Pocket King. I mean, we've benefited from Indy 11 in that way. So, yeah.
And and this is kind of like a strange, whatever parallel thing that's going on. But earlier this year, like, they announced that they were returning to Carroll Stadium, which was like the stadium that they started playing in NASL. So they had been playing in Lucas Oil Field, and I think this was like the MLS ambition side of they started playing in the NFL stadium and all of these things. But they announced that they were moving back. They played this year at Carroll Stadium, and this was while their stadium is being constructed. So like they're also going to be moving into a new ground. So there's a lot of, I guess, like big upside to Indy at the moment. And he's also taking over in a place where there's only really he can only kind of go up from here. With them missing the playoffs, if he even makes the playoffs next season, it's an improvement, and then he can go from there. But yeah, so the Indy move being seen as lateral was understandable, but not. I don't know that it is necessarily like a straight lateral move. Although I think we've all seen, and maybe this is another question kind of Mark's legacy, and we can talk a little bit more about Mark's legacy. But I guess the initial question is do you think that as a result of this move and as a result of the last 3 years, do you think that Mark has left this job as a desirable job? Do you think that this opening will be like a sought after job for coaches of this level?
Yes, absolutely. For a couple of reasons. One being that not only has our manager decided to part ways with the club, but our technical director has too, because that man is one and the same, Mark Lowry. So I think that that's attractive to any prospective manager who wants to have more of a say on the footballing, talent identification and recruiting side of things, because as we know, Mark did all of those things. So I think that's attractive to prospective managers who are used to that kind of I suppose the English model, a lot of European clubs are moving to the continental model now, where you've got a sporting director and a manager, and they're pretty much separate. But for years and years and years, that job was one and the same, and we still kind of see that here in the United States. I think for different reasons. I think for a lot of reasons, for a lot of teams, it's cost conscious, to be fair. If you can have one person do all those jobs, then that's great.
Yeah.
But so that's something that I think would attract, certain manage a stadium that the owners of the club also own. So there's no chance of being evicted anytime soon unless they decide it, right?
Yeah.
The owners are, let's face it, moneyed.
Yeah.
And have shown that they'll push the boat out for the manager and the signings that he wants. They have various sports holdings, so it shows that they're very much interested in growing all these different franchises. So, I mean, those two big things really, really stand out to me, is the stability and the potential leeway you could get if you get this manager job with El Paso Locomotive. You probably will have a ton of say in the recruitment too, and you can really bring in your guys, as it were. Mm-hmm. And have the freedom in that area. So those are the two big things. On top of, the fact that it has been successful, right? There's already pieces here to work with.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of change, to be fair, and we'll be, we'll have our ears to the wall about that and keep the listeners informed. But there's definitely a spine of a team here that you could certainly build on, and the recent success I have no doubt will help the recruitment of new players. So I think all those things make the job attractive. And to be fair to Mark, I think he has left it in left the club in a good place. Kind of going back on Mark's legacy, though, I will say that there are people that maybe feel that, he was very clear about wanting to win something, wanting to win a big trophy, the trophy, USL championship trophy with the club. And he didn't do that.
Yeah.
And now he's gone. So, I can certainly see that too, where that might frustrate or upset fans. I mean, it upsets me, right? I mean, I wanted to see that too, of course. But, it wasn't to be. And the shocking way in which we exited the playoffs this season certainly doesn't help. It's definitely like a 1-2 punch right now for Locomotive faithful. But yeah, I mean, in the cold light of day, I think that this job will be attractive to several candidates. And, even with what Mark has said about the fact that, he was very, very brutally honest about his job search in MLS because, he said there's like 7 openings. And he said this to us, not just to Colin. He said this to you on the phone last night. There's like 7 or 8 openings, and I've not gotten a call back. So, USL Championship's just one level below that. I'm sure the competition is just as fierce.
Yeah.
And clubs, as USL moves more towards this independent kind of model and getting rid of the MLS 2 sides and all that, I mean, the ambition is just going to grow, I would think. We've seen clubs make changes mid-season and kind of acting like their European counterparts in that way, and that if you're not getting the results, you're gone.
Yeah.
So, I think there will be a lot of suitors now. Who the right guy is, or girl, who knows? we'll have to kind of marinate on that a little bit. I'm sure we'll get onto it, but yeah.
Well, so speaking of Mark's legacy, obviously, plenty of success at the club, but like you said, I think the club's and Mark's motto for this season was unfinished business. I think it was known and it was publicized before the final game of the season against RGV, the unfinished business tagline, and the way that things ended change the legacy at all? Is Mark's legacy changed by the fact that the unfinished business is left unfinished, or is it simply just this is how it is and we move on, or does it taint anything?
I think for me personally, I'm still kind of grappling with that myself.
Sure.
But I think for a lot of fans, yes. And I think that has a lot to do with who we are as a city, and we're fiercely loyal to one another, and I could see there being a perception of a lack of that with this move, and and I'm not accusing Mark of that or anything. I totally understand, whom among us has not made a move that we whether in our personal life or school or whatever, that we just think this will be a better situation for me. I cannot sit here and blame him for that.
No,
but emotionally, I could certainly see fans being like, he said unfinished business, and now it's going to be unfinished, and that's not cool.
Yeah,
I get that. And we're not here to police the way people feel about it. So, yeah, certainly, I certainly think people could have that view. Me personally, I'm still kind of, like I said, processing that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's natural to think about the way things progressed, and I think a natural reaction of the fans too is to say well, why not just continue to build the project here? There's such a solid foundation. Give it time, and you could easily be in a similar situation to Indy, where it's all anybody throws around is, well, El Paso Locomotive, like they're in the playoffs every year. They win shit. Like they're just like that team.
Yeah.
And so I can certainly see like, and I think ultimately like, yeah, we all face decisions like that all the time where it's like, do you stick out like what you've got? Do you try to like go to something, and this is like professionally or in personal life, like, do you hang with what you got or do you just like, do you try to jump to a better situation? And I think the reality of this situation is like we talked about, like it's tied up in the fact that I think by now most people thought that it would have been like kind of a no-brainer for an MLS team to take a swing on Mark. And the fact that like USL championship coaches like aren't even really like hitting the consciousness of MLS is what has like forced this move, because it's like, okay, well, if this isn't even like getting anybody's attention, he's like, I literally built this from scratch. So like, what the fuck do I have to do to like get somebody's attention out here? And I can understand the impulse of like, if I haven't moved the needle by now, then like, what's it going to take? And who's to say that in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, like from now, like who's to say that the needle will have moved? And
which is, I'll just say this right now, that's an indictment on MLS.
Big time.
Because I'm confident that Mark Lowry is a more talented coach than many of the ones currently in Major League Soccer dugouts.
Well, and we were talking like before we started recording. I think it's, I don't know, and maybe we're just too close to it or whatever. But I think
right.
The reality of the situation at Locomotive is that I can easily see Mark doing what he did at Locomotive, which is have to assemble a team from nothing, and make tweaks and make adjustments, find his system, like assert his style, all those things. You can see it happening like at scale. Like you can see it. Okay. Yeah. Different budget, different roster rules, different, like all these sorts of like weird idiosyncrasies of MLS. But the reality is like, he wasn't playing with like with infinite money in El Paso. Like he had a decent budget for sure, but he wasn't, he wasn't given a blank check. And so I think it's just easy for us to imagine it happening at a bigger scale. Hey, slightly bigger budget, maybe a little bit wider, like scouting range, that sort of stuff. And it just seems like the skills that he's demonstrated up till now would have suggested that he got a shot. And with some of the like just abysmal projects that exist in MLS and just toil year after year to do absolutely nothing, it just seems like a no-brainer to take a shot on a guy who's like built something like that. But I don't know if it's just us being like too close to it or whatever, or or MLS really just is that insular where they either hire coaches who have some kind of like profile in Europe or are known quantities in the US. Like, I don't know if that's, or like in MLS, I should say, not in the US more broadly, like in MLS specifically.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one.
What about you, though? Is the unfinished business, how does that sit with you? I mean, I like... Because and I have seen this from the beginning.
Yeah. So. No, I like, it definitely stings. I don't think anybody who sits back and says like, oh no, it's fine. Like, I don't think anybody is going to be okay. Like, you don't have to be okay with it necessarily. And I think I'm like, my big thing is that I think about when I think about the project, and I think about like the amount of strides that were taken, all those things, I definitely get the time pressure. There's a part of me, and this is the, El Paso Locomotive fan side. So, maybe I have to like not remove this, but, think about that lens that I'm looking through. But there's a part of me that if I'm Mark, which I'm not, and I want to be very clear about that, but if I'm Mark, like that loss to Roots almost seals me in for another year. Like, where it's like, hey, this is absolutely like not how it's ending type thing. And I think that is going to be a tough thing for a lot of fans to swallow, is that like the way it ended was so unsatisfying. And it's not Mark's like fault specifically. Like there's shared blame, obviously, like in the playoff exit, and we didn't really get a chance to we put off doing the postmortem, and now we like aren't doing it at all, but now we're doing like a much broader postmortem. But I think the reality is that like for anyone, I don't know, it was like watching, it's a little bit like Game of Thrones. Like I'm like, hey, I've really enjoyed this, and like it's not an indictment of the whole time, but the way that it has ended is leaving me a little bit like it's leaving a little something to be desired. And that's just like, it's selfish to think that way, but that is the reality. I think for a lot of fans is it's like, it just doesn't feel like the right way for Mark to go.
For sure. Yeah. We'll say this. I think it's fascinating how Mark is revered everywhere he's been. Most notably with Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Because some of the interactions that we have are with Jacksonville fans who are still following his trajectory, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And this stings for now, and I think it will for a little bit, but
sure.
I can totally see myself following Mark's career with great interest.
100%.
The same way that Armada fans do. And that's just speaks to who he is as not just a coach, but as a man. And, to be fair, this may not be the last that we hear of Mark on this podcast, because as you said at the top of the show, he's been so gracious with us and wanting to come on and talk. And, if we can get that opportunity for the listeners, and by all means we will. But,
yeah.
Real quickly, though, because I'm sure people want to like hear about this, and just like quick fire.
Sure.
Just let's dispel some rumors. Was Mark fired?
No, not by a long shot. Alan Ledford and Andrew Forrest have both spoken to the media and were extremely gracious in their comments, and Mark's professionalism, Mark's like service to the club, all of those things. And yeah. Everybody who has spoken, no, he was not fired.
Was this about money? Is he like living on scraps here in El Paso?
No. And the idea that Mountain Star doesn't pay people like well is also bullshit. Like I'm confident I will. Okay. So I will say this, Mark, one of the first things Mark said on the phone last night was that Mountain Star, or not Mountain Star, but the club did everything they could to try to keep me. Which
there you go.
Take from that what you will.
Yeah. Okay. I think those are the two big ones that,
Yeah.
We heard it from the horse's mouth or the goat's mouth, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But, if you choose not to believe that, then by all means. But we do try to source these things well for you. And I think the source being Mark Lowry is a pretty good one.
Yeah. There was, so with the exit now confirmed, and tomorrow Indy 11 will confirm the news, and I'm sure there are Indy 11 fans who are listening to this who have come thinking like, they are in the East, and as a Western Conference podcast, we know that we don't pay all that much attention to what's going on out East. Like, it's tough to watch all these games. So for the Indy 11 fans listening, or anybody from USL who's listening to this who normally doesn't watch Locomotive, what is Indy 11 getting in Mark Lowry?
Oh, a consummate professional, somebody who wants to be the protagonist in every game, wants to play attacking football, is obsessed with possession, is really good at man management. All his players love him, but he's very demanding. Very demanding. If you don't fit in that locker room, you will not be around.
Yeah, because
it's we before I in a Mark Lowry side.
Yeah,
and if you're down with that, you might even find yourself with a place in his side, even beyond, in front of someone who's maybe the better footballer than you.
Yeah,
on paper, because that team spirit and that selflessness is very important to Mark. So, I mean, you're getting a supreme tactician, someone who gets his ideas across very well, wants to play the game, quote, the right way.
Yep.
He's never going to park the bus and just try to hold on to a lead. He's always going to want to score goals. And El Paso struggled with that initially, but I think we really saw with the addition of key personnel that his ideas finally really exploded into life in this third season. So you're getting a superb coach.
Yeah.
And one who's young. He's only 34 years old. I mean, he's got decades ahead of him to keep perfecting his craft because, as good as he is, there's still things that he can work on. And I think he would agree with that, with us saying that.
Yeah.
So, you're getting, for my money, the best coach in the West. And, that's biased, of course, but
sure,
objectively, he's just so talented. And a great guy. Like, he will talk to anyone about football, about anything.
Yep.
I've had many conversations with him just, at local events or when he used to do the coaches show with ESPN, and he's come on the pod several times. He's really, the community is important to him.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can expect all of that.
Yeah, he honestly, whatever. You could put the money on it now. Like, Indy 11 will be in the playoffs next season, guaranteed.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, like if he gets backed in the way that I expect him to get backed to build that team in his image, and with a full off season, all of those things, like I think Indy 11 immediately become. I'm not saying that they'll, necessarily overtake, Louisville and Tampa, like, right off the bat. But I think, immediately they become, a playoff team, season one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I do personally worry about, like, all these players that do like playing for him being in El Paso. I'm like, oh God, like, please do not come
Mass
for these
exodus.
Yeah. Like, I'm trying to keep some of these boys, but,
we know, Mark brought a lot of Armada to Locomotive. So I mean, it's not, it's not outside of the realms of possibility that he wants to take a couple with him, but yeah.
Man, I hope they built that into, like, his exit clause or whatever. Like, you can't come back for these players. No, I think, and yeah, just to round out that discussion, like, Mark's been very, I think, since he got to Locomotive, like, he's been very open about the fact that he wants to play, as you said, like, the right way. He wants to play attractive, passing, like, dynamic football. He wants to be, he's not one to sit back. He's not one to, like, hit on the counter. And he's going to play that style, like, regardless. And I think, like, we saw in the way that the season's laid out, he laid that foundation season one and, like, built the philosophy of how he wants to play. Season two, it became like a competence with the style. Like the goals that we scored and those sorts of things weren't on accident. Like they weren't like incidental of the style. They were created by it. And then this season it became like adding the flair, like some of just adding so much quality to the spine that already existed, that it became something almost totally different, where it was controlling but attractive, and Lucho's pulling off back heel flick goals, and Diego's doing his thing, like running at defenders and that sort of stuff. Like they were able to improvise off of the spine of this team that existed. So for Indy fans, you are getting one of the best tactical managers, I think, in the league. He built this El Paso Locomotive squad into what it is. So you can see that he also does quite a good job of talent identification. So, it's a coup for you, I will say.
Absolutely.
Good times on the horizon for Indy 11. Well, Christian, we always start things out when you're on with a question. And do we have Christian's question for tonight?
Yeah, so I kind of got the vibe that this was kind of going to be like the episode about nothing. So, because there's nothing to talk about, right? Nothing happened last week. And so I wanted to go with a little bit more of a philosophical question that is also kind of, and it is, why do we watch sports? Especially so for people like us who sports takes up a significant portion of our lives. Like, why do we, actually knowing how we felt like the last 8 days?
That's a good one. Philosophical.
Well, the word philosophical contains the name Phil, so you have to start.
I think first and foremost, like, I was born into it. Like my family, not soccer specific, certainly, because that was gained later in my sports watching life. But watching sports was something that I was, born into. Like my family was, obsessively watching the Bears and Cubs, specifically the Bulls, in the 90s as well, like growing up with that. And I think between the Bulls and the Cubs, like, actually provide like the nice juxtaposition of sports fandom. Like as when I was a kid, because you had the joy and the celebrations and the pain. And there's something, I know that it's kind of a cliche to talk about, like the lows make the highs all that higher. But I think it's really true. And so going through some of the pain, like despite the pains of, I can think of, 2003 Cubs NLCS, the Bartman game and all that stuff, like living through that, and then juxtaposed with the highs of 2016 and the long drought and all that stuff. I think ultimately it's just about the fact that sport, without it being something serious in the sense that, like, it's not something that has like a tangible impact on, real life events, but sport brings you to those like highs and lows of human emotion without there being like a tangible impact on your actual like physical well-being, in a perfect world. So I just think like nothing can replicate the highs and lows, short of like actually physically endangering yourself. Like you can't experience those sorts of highs and lows without sport, and that's what keeps me coming back. So I think it's fitting given the the context of the question and the context of the last week.
So, oh, sorry, Mikka.
No, I was asking myself the same thing as I was really just sad all day Saturday after the game. It's like, why do I watch this? This is awful. Like, this is an awful feeling. But I mean, I have to echo everything Phil said. Although I wasn't actually born into it quite in that way. Like, I definitely have family that are sports fans, but neither of my parents are really like super into like team sports. My mom likes tennis and watching the Olympics and stuff like that, but very casually. And my dad doesn't care for team sports at all. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I don't know how I even picked it up, really. I mean, it's just one of those things that, like, you start watching it and all of a sudden you're, like, obsessed. And that's certainly how I felt about soccer, especially. It's just a nice distraction, too, I think. For, like, the highs and the lows are important, of course, but, I mean, daily life can be really hard and really taxing, and it's nice to escape for a little bit. And I think, you know, especially given like COVID-19, the lockdowns and all that, like I think we all saw like what we were missing when none of the sports were on, right? Like, it was just like, well, what do we do now with our time that isn't spent working and all that? So yeah, the distraction and the kind of escapism of it has certainly appealed to me and keeps me coming back, on top of, you know, experiencing the success and how sweet that is when, you know, your teams are not as successful, as Phil said. So yeah, even after being really sad about Locomotive, I'm already thinking about next season. I'm sure we'll get onto that tonight as well. So,
Christian, U.S. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, kind of like you, Phil. So I'm the youngest of three boys. Both of my brothers were all pretty I don't know if successful is the right word, but they were pretty able athletes. You know, they played, you know, varsity sports in high school and all that kind of stuff. And so I grew up watching, you know, them. And of course they were watching sports on their own. So I was always kind of exposed to it. And I was never really gifted with their athletic ability. But I always still had the desire to be around sports. So, you know, obviously if I couldn't do it, I turned to, you know, to watching it. And so I've always grown up around it, kind of like you. And I don't think I ever really had an attachment to, you know, a team until I moved to San Antonio. Because, you know, we didn't really have much in El Paso, you know, in by way of professional sports. So I enjoyed watching them, but I never had like a passion for a team and stuff until I moved to San Antonio. And that was, you know, when the Spurs were in the middle of trying to win, you know, their fifth title. And so that's when I kind of really started getting into it. And when you're when you're there in a city, you know, in a region that has that what's the word? I guess that passion for a team, you can't help but just be absorbed by it. And so being involved with that, being able to be part of that is kind of what has drawn me to spend invest the time that I have in the last 10 years into watching sports. And was in San Antonio when they won their last championship in 2014. I was there. They were doing watch parties in the finals for the away games.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2013, they were like 6 seconds away from winning the championship. It was game 6 and they were up 3-2, and Ray Allen for the Heat hit a corner 3 like with 6 seconds left to take the lead. And so they lost that game and proceeded to lose game 7. So that was the first real dagger to the heart that I've ever felt. But then the following year, they proceeded to blow the Heat out and to win the final in 5 games. So, that, like you were saying, that kind of roller coaster of going from those lows to the ultimate high that you can feel. It was just it just gives you a sense of like pride, and it's kind of silly. Like when you look at it, when you step outside yourself to look at it, it's really silly. You know, we're so passionate and so driven by these men playing a game, these strangers, you know, these strangers that are playing a game. But so that makes it really silly, but that also makes you just think about it even more, like there's something to this, obviously, because it's not just us. It's not the minority of people,
right?
You know, that feel this way. And so I just think being part of that really big community, as sports fans in general, you know, there's those micro communities for every team, you know, every sport, but everyone knows, whether you watch hockey and you've never watched a game of soccer in your life or vice versa, you know, you all know the feeling. If you're, you know, someone tells you that their hockey team won the championship, I'm speaking for me personally because you guys know a little bit more about hockey than I do, but someone tells me their hockey team won the championship, I know that feeling. I can relate, even though I don't directly know what they're talking about. So yeah. I just think that community is really what attracts me to it.
That being said, Mikka, now the hard yards begin for El Paso Locomotive, because we have to go about replacing Mark, and it's not a straightforward task. Like, we were talking last night, like offline, about the fact that Mark's hire was created by like the most random, specifically American soccer situation that could possibly exist, which is Jacksonville Armada ending up in NPSL because of a lawsuit that NASL was carrying out and is still carrying out against the United States Soccer Federation. So this next hire, like, there's not any of these weird sort of situations, and there's no whatever, Nate from Ted Lasso Wunderkinds, like, floating around out there because of legal action. So what do you think? Have you been thinking about any potential replacements? There's been a few names like being thrown around on Twitter today, but what do you make of the search for a replacement and any potential options that are kind of floating out there?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you can't overstate how much of a job El Paso Locomotive have on their hands to find someone who, you know, even comes close. And you won't find Mark Lowry. There's only one Mark Lowry, right? But he's left the club in a place where someone very talented could take it to the next level potentially. I thought it was really interesting in Joe's piece on the striker, where he pointed out that the club are not shutting out the idea of an internal solution, if you will, in Mark's assistant manager, Matt Williams. I think that's fascinating. Nothing against Matt, but I hope that we'd be a little bit more adventurous than that, and find someone with similar to experience to Mark, if not more. So, and I'm also kind of surprised that Matt wouldn't go with him to Indy 11.
That was my big thing. Like, it's quite common in the European game, like, for the staff to move with the manager.
Right.
And obviously, given the opportunity at a head coaching job, like, an assistant may move up, but I would be surprised if Mark didn't try to convince Matt to come with him.
Yeah, Matt's very important to that setup. I mean, you always see him on the sideline with the iPad and actively coaching and all this. So yeah, that surprised me a little bit too. I mean, of course, we'll have to just see with time, but we did kind of throw some names around, at least between us, and you had your list on Twitter.
Yeah.
Shall we go through that?
Yeah, I think so. I had I can't remember what I called it, like top of the head, overreactionary, probably too narrow wish list. So I guess we can just go down the line and talk about the names on it. I think I started with John Harkes.
Yes, John Harkes of Greenville Triumph Soccer Club. Is that right?
Yes.
So why John?
So John's history, well, more broadly, is that like he had a pretty significant playing career, and he became the third American to play at Wembley ever. So he played for, like, during his playing days, he played Sheffield Wednesday, Derby County. He played at West Ham, and then he returned to play in MLS. Actually, like in the latter stages of his career, and he had a long career. DC United, New England Revolution, and Columbus Crew, and then he got into management. And he started as an assistant at New York Red Bulls, but he really notably managed FC Cincinnati when they were still in USL, and was extremely successful with FC Cincinnati. In his time with FC Cincinnati, he was there for 3 seasons and went crazy. In terms of his dominance in the league. Their last season in USL, they finished with 77 points and walked the Eastern Conference. And at a time when Louisville was still now playoffs, I think they still stumbled in the playoffs, which it happens to the best of us, I guess. But since then, when they made the move up to MLS, they actually ditched him for a glamour hire, which was Yap Stam, I think. And that did not go great. So anyways, he went to Greenville Triumph, who had started up and are in USL League One and have been one of the most consistent forces in League One. They were the best team in the league, and I think won USL League One by virtue of having the best regular season record, because the final got canceled last year. This year I
believe made it to the final the previous year as well. So
yeah, they've been dominant since they've existed. Basically, they've been very successful. And John Harkes has been at FC Cincinnati, and then at Greenville, he's the technical director and the head coach. So he holds both of those roles that Mark holds, and I think by virtue of that, is a pretty good candidate for the Locomotive job.
And I personally just really like John Harkes because he's from Kearney, New Jersey, which I grew up in New Jersey, and New Jersey is a soccer hotbed. I mean, some of the greats have come from there. Tim Howard. John Harkes himself had almost 100 appearances for the United States. Tony Meola, Tab Ramos. I mean,
yeah,
definitely pedigree there in the American game. So nothing to overlook. Jay Mims, though, you're sticking with USL League One.
Yes.
Jay Mims of Union Omaha, and I think we talked about this tangentially, kind of on a previous episode where we talked about who we'd want to see come up to USL Championship.
Yeah.
I think you pointed out, one of us did, Union Omaha.
Yeah. No, I think Union Omaha has emerged quite quickly as, I think there's been other teams in USL League One that have gotten more attention for one reason or another, but Union Omaha have now 2 seasons in a row made it to the final. And last year, obviously the final was canceled, but they're back in the final again this year, and they had by far the best record in the league. And in the semifinal, which they had a bye into by virtue of that first round win, or that first round, their first place finish in the league, they won 6-1, I think, against FC Tucson. So yeah, they play good stuff, scored a ton of goals this year. And I think the thing that's attractive about Jay Mims, despite the fact, in addition to the fact that Union Omaha are extremely competitive, is the fact that he's previously worked as part of our Real Salt Lake's academy.
Right.
And I love the idea of a guy who's got experience working with the youth levels with El Paso's like growing academy project and like all these links with, and who knows like if these links will stay intact, I guess, but with the Barca residency program and all these things, like there's a lot of opportunity there. So I love the idea of bringing in someone who's got experience at the academy level, because it just adds a layer of depth to that technical director role, where not only are you like building and managing the first team, but you're also overseeing a lot of the academy development and bringing players up through the academy. So yeah, Jay Mims is an intriguing choice. And I think their favorites, like they're going to, John Harkes and Jay Mims are going to meet in the USL League One final. And I would...
Is that being streamed somewhere? Because now I'm watching...
It's on ESPN Plus, I think.
Is it? Okay.
And I do love the idea of this as winner gets the Locomotive job.
Locomotive open manager position.
Promotion playoff.
Oh, man. Well, let's talk Ben Pierman of Memphis 901, who has coached Now Logue this season.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that one?
So Ben Pierman is an interesting choice because he also managed Detroit City FC when they were still in the amateur levels. He managed Detroit City FC for 6 seasons, which is like an extremely long tenure for a young coach, because I do want to emphasize he's like 36 years old also. So he was there for 6 seasons. He got hired when he was like 28 or something like that. So yeah, he spent a lot of time at Detroit City FC, had a really good tenure there, left to become an assistant at Memphis 901 and was promoted essentially to the head coaching job after he had the interim tag at the end of last year. And he took a pretty bleak Memphis 901 team, turned them into a playoff team in 1 season. And they had a good showing in the playoffs as well. Obviously, they did go out. I don't think there's any shame in that. And they're showing because they played Louisville, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, Louisville, I think it was a 1-0 win. Like, so yeah, I love the idea, one, of a guy who's got this amount of tenure in management jobs despite being young, because it's reminiscent of Mark. And right. Then I actually talked to, between my tweet garnered some very small like interactions, but I was encouraged by the amount of ire that I drew from some of the fan bases of these coaches, because it told me I was on the right track. Yeah. But one of the things that was talked about with Ben Pierman was actually from, and some people may know a couple of these names from like soccer Twitter generally, but at Saint FDW, who is better known as Fletcher Nostradamus, who's a member of like the 2 Cents Sports Network, and he's covered Detroit City for a long time. He talked about Ben Pierman as being like the guy who gets the most out of his players. Which is a really, great trait to identify in somebody. And that was something too that USL Tactics, John at USL Tactics, also shouted out about Ben Pierman. Let me try to find his actual tweet, because he was very complimentary of the potential of Locomotive hiring Ben Pierman. He said, the Pierman fit would be so good. What he did with that Memphis midfield is highly reminiscent of Lowry's ability to bring the best out of Richie Ryan, Dylan Mahrez, and the rest. So yeah, support from Detroit City, longtime Detroit City coverers and USL Tactics. So I'll take that one.
I like that. Now this one, your last suggestion here before we get on to your crazed suggestion of Bielsa, but this last one, is like, it might be like hashtag too soon, but I'm also liking it. Jordan Farrell of Oakland Roots.
This is, yeah. Since we're using hashtags, this is hashtag recency bias, 1000%. But all of the reasons that we talked about and the things that you brought up in the preview of Oakland Roots and the things that we saw in that game, because we have both gone through the pain of rewatching that game, that fateful night.
Yep.
There's a few things that I really like about this. The first thing that I really like about the potential of Jordan Farrell is that Oakland Roots, I'm really trying to like not be disrespectful. Oakland Roots, like, he was getting the most out of that team in making the playoffs. And after the way they started the season, they had no business getting into the postseason. And the fact that they played like that amount of just like must win soccer, like there's something in addition to the tactical side, which he clearly has like a pretty good grasp on things. And I mean, we haven't been able to break down the like the way that Roots played, but for long stretches of that game against us, he was able to like nullify a lot of what we were trying to do. And not to say that he didn't also get lucky in stretches, because there are some moments in that game where, yeah, it could have gotten out of hand. But I mean, it's fair to say that it could have gotten out of hand the other way as well, if not for Logan. So anyways, I say all that just to say that Jordan Farrell clearly has like a good grip on the tactical battles. And when the chips were down, Oakland Roots like got it done. Like they won the games that they needed to win. I think it's an extremely I think this is an outside hire, because I don't know that Farrell would even be looking to move up, and Roots, like, he may see Roots as like a project that he wants to continue. Right. So I'm completely like, I'm not sure if this is even realistic, but I do like what I saw in terms of, I think, like, given a better playing staff, and again, no disrespect to the players at Oakland Roots, but I think given a better squad, or given the chance to build something like over the course of a little bit, I do think that he'll continue to like make a name for himself. And yeah, ultimately he kind of outfoxed us. So yeah, Jordan Farrell.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, you did say your last shout was Marcelo El Loco Bielsa.
I just think, like, before he retires for good, he deserves one season at Locomotive so that they can do like El Loco tifos and shit. Like,
imagine Marcelo on his bucket, down the I don't know, outfield line or whatever.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I do love the idea of Marcelo. Like,
I think it would take a bit to get him out of Leeds, but
yeah.
That would be some nice synchronicity, if you will.
Exactly.
Well, look, I mean, it'll be fascinating to see who ends up in the dugout in Mark's stead. It's just crazy that we're having this conversation. Like, we knew the day was coming, but we didn't know that it was this day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's when I told the fans to enjoy the good times, I thought they'd last, a little tiny bit longer, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, has this helped at all?
It has. I feel today was I was very aggro, like, all day.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you guys probably muted your phones with how much I was blowing up the Slack channel, like, Rah!
No, not at all. No, it was cathartic. I think like we all needed, some outlet. And I hope for those of you listening, like especially for the Locomotive fans listening, I hope this has helped like a little bit, because I know there's plenty of people out there who are just trying to work through their feelings around the move and all of that. And I think at the end of the day, like I'm very excited about the next steps. And throughout this podcast, Mikka, we've talked about kind of the milestones that start to make El Paso Locomotive like feel more and more like a real established club. And we've talked about, the transfer rumors and the sagas and like the drama and all this different stuff. But this is a big step in the real club. Like we're a real club now.
It is. Managers move on. And, I think that the circumstances, while they feel bad right now, it sure beats having a manager sacked, right? For poor performances or whatever the case may be. Everyone's devastated, and that says a lot, I think, about the impact that Mark has had. And, not to repeat old points that I've already made, but yeah, I mean, I'll take this over like a falling out with the fans or like something, you know what I mean? Like those kind of manager sagas that we've seen.
Yeah, like eighth notch
elsewhere.
Eighth notch with the Wenger out.
We don't need all that. I'm happy to say there was, never that I could see a legitimate like Lowry out movement or something ridiculous like that. So I think all things being equal, like we're pretty lucky.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. And I think it's also, leaving the club in a spot where we can be optimistic about our prospects, because I think like the other weirdness of this is, if it is a sacking and it's a team's kind of sitting down in the dumps outside the playoffs, all that stuff, like it can start to get a little weird, especially for a team without a ton of pedigree. So the idea that we're able to do this manager search like from a position of strength, that is an upside, for sure. Because I think we are an attractive destination. It'll just be fascinating to see how attractive of a destination we are and like how we're viewed by the candidates who I think I do wish one way that I wish we were a little more like a real club is I wish Locomotive would start leaking their candidates so that we could joke about
who's first
second,
choice, who's third, and who's eighth. And we'll really be a real club when Unai Emery turns us down.
I was gonna say like we're about to hire Nuno Espirito Santo. So,
oh my God. Now that's one way to shit on Mark's legacy.
I would be over the moon with that signing. To be fair, though.
Yeah.
No,
am I kidding? That would be
insane. Gosh. Well, hopefully this has helped for you Locomotive fans out there. For the Indy 11 fans who have continued to listen. Thanks for tuning in. And you've got a great manager on your hands, and you're going to enjoy his tenure. I can pretty much guarantee it. So, for our advice to the Locomotive fans of these are the good times, like Indy 11 fans, same deal. So, take good care of him, as Mark moves on. But, for the Locomotive fans, we're not going anywhere. So we'll continue to be right here, and cover the club with you. And hopefully, we'll have some news, sooner than later in terms of the next steps of the club and start to get some direction, because I mean, Mikka, the reality is that it is, mid-November, and by February, like we're going to be playing preseason games.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're moving forward. I mean, I know kits and things are already in the works. Player contracts need to be sorted out. You know, there's shakeups elsewhere in the club as well. I mean, we know some people that we like it from the club have moved on as well, so those positions will need to be filled. I mean, there's a lot going on right now, and I think that, you know, I think change can be a good thing sometimes. Sometimes things do get a little stale. I'm not saying that it was getting stale with Mark or anything, but
no,
you know, this can be an opportunity. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some bumps, at least on the playing side of things next season, because, you know, it's always hard when a manager with the stature of Mark Lowry leaves. But, you know, we'll be Locomotive fans, you know, rain or shine.
Yeah, and I think, all of this will come quickly, and we'll obviously be there for every step of the way. And as soon as we start to hear anything about an appointment and about any potential moves out or in from on the playing staff side, we'll certainly bring it to you. And in the shorter term, in terms of like things to look forward to over the next few days and the next couple of weeks, we've got a couple of interviews that Mikka hinted at. The one we'll be trying to have Mark on the pod, but we'll also have some discussion around Mark continuing later this week. So hopefully you guys tune in, and we will we'll continue to work to bring you the Locomotive coverage you deserve, and we're all hanging in there. So not the off season for Seriously Loco yet. Still plenty to do before any of that rolls around, and I hope you'll stick with us. Follow us on Twitter at Seriously Loco. Subscribe, like, follow, rate, whatever the podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. And until next time, guys, stay loco.